2, 1. Welcome back. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. We're finally getting into some scores.
We are going to do this is Ashes of Outlands, all the Ashes of Outland cards, every single one of them, valued by our algorithm. If you're wondering what the hell the algorithm is, listen to the previous episode. This is episode 2 of this particular Lightforge podcast, video slash podcast slash whatever thing that's going on here for Ashes of Outlands. And the 1 hour, the last half, the second half of the first video is going to explain what the algorithm actually does. Now we're just going to jump in and talk about the neutral cards, specifically the best neutral card, the 13 best neutral cards. It's a weird number, but it was hard for us to draw a line besides like after the number 1 card and then just the next like 12 cards. So we're gonna do all of that all at once. So the first thing to know is that overall Ashes of Outland neutral cards are not as good as Descent of Dragons neutral cards. That's a really good thing. Because Descent of Dragons neutral cards like Twin Tyrant, like Evasive Worm, like they were a little too much. They did not do good things for the meta. They were like even more swingy than like my rule for neutral cards is that anything over a 133 should not exist. Twin Tyrant is a 152. So it should really not exist. And anything over a 133 warps the meta.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want neutral cards defining the meta,
Yeah.
right? Because if you have neutral cards defining the meta, especially powerful common cards like a Twin Tyrant, at least Primordial Drake was epic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when you have common cards that are that good and that swingy, it makes games really unfun, which I think most people would agree. The amount of Twin Tyrants and the availability of Twin Tyrants is not fun for anyone.
Yeah,
so,
and especially as a common. Like,
yeah,
Rap Golem was at least a rare. Rap Golem, by the way, is like 3 points below Twin Tyrant, which is like not at all weaker than Twin Tyrant, but it's at least a rare, so you don't see it as often. Okay, so that's my view on neutrals. On class cards, I don't like seeing things above a 150, but it's like the real line that I really don't want to see, especially now that they have this whole new philosophy in the Year of the Dragon of just making crazy stuff, is like a 175. Like anything over 175, I think in the class cards is game warping. The same way anything over a 133 is game warping in neutrals.
Those tend to be the cards that have almost zero drawback, and the upside is they give an effect that is worth like double their cost. So you end up having like for a 6 mana card, you end up having almost like 10, 11, 12 mana worth of stuff, which is really dumb, which is really, really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of classes, unfortunately, you do see cards like that.
Yup. I'm just showing some of these high-scoring cards we have from the algorithm. Twin Tyrant, Evasive Worm, Rap Golem, Henchclan Hogsteed. People don't like to think of Henchclan Hogsteed as a super elite card, and I mean it's not a Twin Tyrant or anything. It's a 145, not a 152. But remember when it first came out? That was when 3-2s became useless all of a sudden. Like just like overnight. Like it was like, well, no more 3-2s. Why? Because everyone has a Henchclan Hogsteed. It warps the entire game, and not in like a healthy way.
So here is what the algorithm, like we spent some time talking about what the algorithm is useful for. In terms of the score, when it's presented to you, what is it taking into effect? Well, it's taking into effect its playability, right? So big cards are necessarily penalized for being big. So if a big card, like an 8 mana, 9 mana, God forbid, 10 mana card is scored high, that means it's ridiculous. That means its effect is so good that those times in which it's a dead card in your hand doesn't matter in comparison to how good it is when you actually are able to play it. And a card like Henchclan Hogsteed, we reward it, or rather the algorithm rewards it for being playable basically from the very beginning of the game. So it's how good it is taking into account playability and also its stats relative to what you're supposed to get. This is why Henchclan Hogsteed is very good. For 2 mana, you can't expect much more. This is why, when Stubborn Gastropod was in the meta. Why it was so extremely high? Because it's just too good for a 2-drop. Like on average, it's taking out something worth like 3.5 mana. So, which makes it really good. And these are things that you have to keep in your head. If you're just saying it's like, oh, but it's just like a pretty good 2-drop. A pretty good 2-drop is really good. So once again, keep everything in mind. Yes, that 2-drop once you go to turn 10 is not going to be as good, even though it's like a really good 2-drop. But these are things that we take into account for the score. It's going to be different once you're in like pick 29. It's going to be different once you're in a game. But the scores reflect how good it is overall, generally.
Okay. So let's move on into Ashes of Outland cards. The number one card in Ashes of Outland, the number one card, which we did a poll of our Twitch audience before this. This is also being streamed live on Twitch, as we usually do. So we did a poll of our Twitch audience, and we just kind of was like, what do you think the number one card is? We're going to tell you there's one card that's like more than 10 points better than like the next like tier of cards that is neutral. And the first 10 ideas, suggestions out of, I think there's only like less than 30 neutral cards in this set, because they had to have extra Demon Hunter cards. The first 10 did not hit. And these are educated people, like hardcore arena players. You know, they read Arena HS, or like they follow people. They probably watch other reviews of Ashes of Outlands before this. And none of those were the right answers. Someone eventually got it. It was Taro. But it wasn't even his first or second choice. So this is the card. Was it a second choice? Okay. This was the card that we rated the number one card. Now, I'm going to preface this in saying you should not expect this to totally warp the meta, even though it's a 151, and we just said any card above 133 will warp the meta. That is because it is an epic card. So you just won't be offered it enough for it to be warping every meta, even if it is a neutral card and every class has access to it. It is the Morarg Artificer. 2 mana, 2/4 demon. Is it not Morarg?
I think it's Moarg.
Moarg. Okay.
Artificer. 2 mana, 2/4 demon. All minions take double damage from spells. This is the point where you, the listener, say, Merps and ADWCTA, you guys have lost your marbles. There is no way this is a 150 level of good. We score this
Twin Tyrant level.
This is almost Twin Tyrant. How could it be that good? How could an extra stat be that good? How could a double-sided effect be that good?
Okay.
Let me tell you guys. Oh, you're going to tell
me. No. You tell them. You tell them about the extra stat. I'll break down the ability.
Here's what we need to look at, right? How much does an extra stat matter? We have just spent an hour in the previous video telling you that swings are huge. Well, that extra stat on turn 5 matters some. The extra stat on turn 8 pretty much doesn't matter, as we will see when we go to 8 mana cards. That extra stat on turn 2 matters a ton. You getting an extra stat on a 2 mana 2/3 or 3/2, that extra stat in relation to the base stats, because that's what you need to compare it to, the base stats. It is such a huge percentage, and it matters, right? You're making a 2/3 into a 2/4, which effectively means it will always at least trade with 2/3s, and then if you have if you have a ping as well, dominates it. Or it just trades and still leaves a body with 3/2s.
Keep in mind, those are like the really good statted 2-drops. Like, you don't get better statted 2-drops than that. Like, remember how crazy the Henge Clan Hogsteed was when it comes out on curve and it warps everything? Henge Clan Hogsteed doesn't lose to any 2-drop, basically. And it loses to Morarg Artificer.
So here is so I want to talk about the effect unless you want to talk about it.
Oh, okay, fine. You could just talk about everything then.
Okay, so this is where I am going to play Papega chat and do the Papega thing, which is like, but Merps, this effect, it'll screw you over, right? Like, what? Like, dude, I can imagine all the times in which this is a bad effect. Yes, you can. And that's why you're Papega Chat. So here is the thing that you want to look at with double-sided effects. Double-sided effects you can look at in terms of like also double-sided board clears or other double-sided effects. You are able to control the initial use of it. And whenever you take a double-sided effect, right, we've seen kind of similar effects in which you give spell power or spell damage to both players and other metas with other cards as well. It's about how much you are investing in there and how much you can afford to not play it if you don't want to play it. So here's the thing. If you are devoting this sort of effect to a 6-mana card, and I'm forgetting the name of that card, but I think some of you guys know what I'm talking about. You not being able to play that card until turn 6, and then afterwards, you devoting so much of your resources into that effect to have it give you, like, to basically have it, punch you in the mouth, that's really bad. Now, if you are able to control it by having it in such a small card such that you can use it on the same turn, and then in the later stages of the game, if you are winning, because it is so cheap, you don't need to put it down. And the drawback of you not being able to play a 2-drop is not as bad in the overall sense as you not being able to play that 6-drop that you already sacrificed so much of your deck and your flexibility in order to draft. These are things that you have to think about. So yes, you have to play with this smartly, but the times in which it works for you, which include playing on turn 2 to get a 1-stat advantage, that's huge. Playing it any time so you can use the effect and get the board back or secure the board, versus you in a winning state later on, not being able to play a 2-drop. You're just like, oh no, I can't play a 2-drop. You don't care. It's a freaking 2-drop.
Because that's the point. That's why you were saying on turn 8, how much does the extra stat matter? It doesn't matter at all. How much does the 2/4 matter on turn 8? It barely matters.
And here's the thing. Even, like, you can say, oh, but Merps, what if you're just playing this on turn 2 on an empty board, and then they had a 2-damage spell that they used to take it out? Okay, they 1-for-1 you.
Yeah.
That's great. Like,
they not only 1-for-1 you, they would have 1-for-1 to Raptor too.
Yeah.
Like, in that very limited case, a 2/3 would have been better. But you'd still make them use a removal on a 2/4. That's pretty good, right? Like, your 2-drop takes out a removal. No one's ever upset when their 2-drop gets removed, right? When their 2-drop with, like, no ability that they're depending on gets removed. You're happy. Like, you ever get a 2-drop Frostbolted? You're happy. You're not sad. You're not like, oh no, he Frostbolted me. You're like, okay, good. He has 1 less Frostbolt, and I have 1 less Raptor. I win this exchange. So on 2, Mirage Artificer just, like, wins, period. Like, you will have a very tiny, less than 1% chance of getting screwed by it from, like, a backstab, or, like, that's really the only one I can think of. Later on, you just don't play it. If you have, you have a vulnerable board to it. And what do I mean by a vulnerable board? You know what removals your opponent has. Like, if you're afraid of just, like, let's say, something like a Flame Strike, right? Well, this doesn't really do anything. If you have a small board out anyway, doubling a Flame Strike isn't to your opponent's advantage if all of your stuff is 4 health or below anyway, right? This only matters if your opponent has something like an Arcane Explosion, right? And then that deals 2 damage. It really matters if your opponent has, like, a Consecrate, right? So you should have a decent read by the late game of what kind of board clears your opponent has if you're a good player. Like, board clears are one of the easiest things to read. And once you have that read, you can play this. If you don't have that read, and your board is vulnerable, like, let's say you have an 8/8 on the board, and then, like, a 4/4, and then you're wondering whether to put a 2/4 on the board with this Mirage Artificer, and you don't know if your opponent has a Flame Strike or not, don't do it. Like, your 2/4 tempo is not worth it. So that's, like, the downside mitigation. I want to emphasize something that Merps mentioned, but, like, isn't, like, I want to punch it even further. You play this card first. You Mirage Artificer and Consecrate first. You Mirage Artificer and Swipe first. So for every time you're thinking of, oh no, my opponent can screw me, you have had way more chances to screw your opponent, with this card. So this ability is like overall a significant positive. It is not a net negative on this body. So you now not only have a 2-mana 2/4, that's just a ridiculous stat line to begin with, but you on top of that have a positive ability that is mostly in your control. Like, it's very, very good. And this card, it's going to be different in different classes. Taro in chat asked what it would be, but it's not really that. Like, I don't know, if people are expecting it to like drop like 40 points because if it's a warrior, it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that because it's the 2-mana 2/4 body. Like, that is still a huge part of its value as being played on turn 2. And it traits evenly with 3/3s, it traits evenly with 3/4s, and those are 3 drops. It eats 3/2s, it trades with 2/3s, and it eats like any kind of 1-drop. Like, it's just the most ridiculous curve card. But in Warrior, it is a 143. In Mage, it is a 179. Because, you know, Mage.
Mage.
Like I was saying, you don't want to get Arcane Explosion when this happens. You don't want to get, but yeah, like it's ridiculous in Mage. But even in Warrior, it's not that bad. That's my point. I don't want people to be like, oh, I would never take this in Warrior. No, you still freaking take this card. It's not a Twin Tyrant level card in Warrior, but it's still a pretty premium card in Warrior.
Is a 2-mana 2/4 good? Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, this is one of those things in which, look, is the swing going to be as big as Twin Tyrant? No, just because it's a 2-mana card. If a 2-mana card had the exact swing as a Twin Tyrant, then the game is just completely broken.
But if you play 4 cards with the same amount of swing as a Mirage Artificer, you would get a much bigger swing than Twin Tyrant. But you'd also invest 4 cards, right?
This card is just insane. And look, here's what I want to kind of separate. Because for some reason, people look at a card like Dragonfire Potion, Fellfire Potion, or Hellfire as somewhat different than a card like this.
Mm-hmm.
And they identify those cards as premium cards. I don't think anyone out there by this point will say, like, oh, Hellfire is bad. Dragonfire Potion is bad. They're like, no, those are super premium. But I think some people still look at this and they're like, no, this is like, at best, a neutral effect.
Yeah,
right?
No, it's definitely a positive effect.
You should think of it the same way as those cards in terms of the situations in which it is bad versus the situations in which it is good, and that it's really just bad when you're winning. And if you're winning, you don't play it. But Dragonfire costs 6. This only costs 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people look at cards that you can't play when you're winning, and for some reason still are like, whoa, that's bad. You can't use it in this situation. You'd much rather a card that you can't play when you're winning than a card that you can't play when you're losing, which is some cards. So in the way that we still identify those double-sided board clears as really, really, really good, even though it's literally useless when you are winning and you are on the board, the same sort of concept, you need to apply it to cards like this, even though a lot of people don't, which I don't understand why. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So Mirage Artificer, our top card, matches Twin Tyrant almost.
Yep.
Very close to Twin Tyrant. But again, will not ruin the meta because it is epic.
No.
Like,
yeah.
It's fine, like in terms of like how it impacts the meta, but it's not fine in terms of its power level, and it's not fine in terms of its swing. It's just it's like we don't. I would not have made this card, or I would have made this card a 2/3. But there it is. We have it. You'll see it.
Or make it a 4/2 if you want, like those sorts of stats, right? A 4/2 and suddenly it's just like it would go way down. Like all
right.
But no, it's a 2/4.
And one thing that I know we mentioned in the last video, but we didn't mention this, is that these are not actually the final scores. You'll see the final scores when the game is actually released, and this is like on the right before the game is released when we update the actual website. Like if you go to thelifeforge.com right now, these scores aren't up there because they're not final. We're still doing last minute meta tweaks, and there may be a bug, but it will not affect anything by more than 10 points, and most things not by more than like 5 points. So I don't think it'll affect this card by more than like 3 points at most. So it's still going to be way better than the other cards and like Twin Tire and Rap Golem level. Even if you look at it again, you're like, I remember it was a 150 something. Now it's a 140 something. What happened? Like, the stuff is still in flux. This may also go up. Like, I don't know. It's kind of a weird card. Like, this may actually be better than Twin Tyrant by the time we get the meta fixes done for this meta. But okay, just to let you know, these are not like final numbers. We will put the final numbers out before the game is released. All right, next card. This is a popular pick for number 1 card in the neutral set for Ashes of Outlands. It's going to come in at a 137, which is around where Faceless Corruptor is. It's around where Volpera Scoundrel is. It is a premium card. It should not exist. It's above the 133 mark. It should not exist in neutral, at least. But here it is. It's not that much above the line. It is a Frozen Shadow Weaver. 3 mana, 4/3, Battlecry, freeze an enemy. We have other freeze the enemy cards like Frost Elemental that loses like 3 stats to freeze an enemy. We have the Shaman Murloc, which is a class card, but it's a 2 mana 2/2, so it loses like 1 stat to freeze an enemy. This one doesn't lose any stats to freeze an enemy. It's not even an enemy minion. Like, there were ways that they could have made this just like a little bit less OP, but no, this is just the new power level of cards for neutral. And I mean, it's not the best neutral card. This one is common. Most of the neutrals you're going to see are common because of the way they allocated common rarities in Ashes of Outlands expansion. Not much to talk about here. You know this is powerful. You know how the effect works.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can move on to the next one.
Yeah. So, sorry, you want to say something?
We should talk about the next 3.
We should talk about. I was about to say. Okay, so the next 3, and I'm not kidding. Like, this may look like we just made up numbers, but I think this speaks to how freaking well Blizzard balanced these 3 cards. Because they have the exact same score, plus or minus 1. That is Guardian Aug Merchant, Rocket Aug Merchant, and Rusty... Oh, sorry. I thought they were all the Aug Merchants. Okay, so 2 of the Aug Merchants have a 133 score. Your final Aug Merchant, we'll talk about with it, is a 126. It's like... what, like 8 points? I don't know. What's 133 minus? Not 8 points, 7 points. So it's 7 points below the other ones, but still basically on the same page. And that's the Ethereal Augment.
It's still quite good. It's just like the Guardian and Rocket ones are clearly a step above the Ethereal Aug Merchant, which I think we all agree on. Yeah.
Okay, so let me tell you what these cards are. I'm going to run through all 3 of them first. So the Guardian Aug Merchant is a 1 mana 2/1 Battlecry. Deal 1 damage to a minion and give it Divine Shield. You hit your opponent, it gets a Divine Shield if it doesn't die, or you hit your own guy, it gets a Divine Shield if it doesn't die. Rocket Aug Merchant, which is 1 mana 2/1 Battlecry, deal 1 damage to a minion and give it Rush. Giving your opponent Rush doesn't matter, but you can give your own minions Rush, damages them once. And the slightly lower card, the Ethereal Aug Merchant at 126, is 1 mana 2/1 Battlecry, deal 1 damage to a minion and give it spell damage plus 1. So those are the cards. You wanna start with the Guardian Aug Merchant, which I think is the most complicated and most exciting card?
Yeah, definitely. So once again, I'm gonna say that even though like cards like Frozen Shadow Weaver and Guardian Aug Merchant are lower than the top card, these are the cards that are going to impact your games much more often. So in terms of meta impact, the 3 cards we're talking about here, also with the Frozen Shadow Weaver, they are going to give that Twin Tyrant-esque impact. Not exactly the same,
because they're going to be offered about like 10 times more often than Mirage Artificer.
Also, you're going to see it played more often.
Yeah, because I think people are going to also skip Mirage Artificer because it has a negative effect, like a potentially negative effect. And as we know, with anything that has a potentially negative effect, a lot of players just don't like picking them or value them much lower than what they're actually like worth.
Yeah. So Guardian Aug Merchant. Let's talk about this one because it's really interesting. This is the 1 mana 2/1 Battlecry. Deal 1 damage to a minion and give it Divine Shield. I was on Arena HS. This got a ton of hype. People were saying that this was potentially the best card in the set. And
it's close. It's number 3 by our standards, right?
It's close. It's actually like it's very, very close to Frozen Shadow Weaver, such that
same tier.
They're basically the same. They're basically the same. So if you said that this was like the best card in the set, our tier list pretty kind of backs you up on that. because
Arguably, like you have to discount Mirage Artificer as like
right, right.
existing either because it is a epic or because you just like really disagree with our analysis or because I don't know, you are going to be one of the many people out there who hate on Mirage Artificer.
Yeah, sure. So look, this is one of those cards that the algorithm obviously really likes. Flexible, doesn't give away any stats to have an effect. Is it awkward? Yeah, it is awkward sometimes. Giving Divine Shield to a minion, though, is really, really good. Sometimes you could just use that. Sometimes you can just use that as a better Elven Archer. But the question I'm going to pose to you, ADWCTA, which is the one I think a lot of people are thinking, is like, why isn't it higher? Why isn't it higher than 133? I thought this would be like a 150 plus, ADWCTA.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Paladin just to show you the most comparable card that everyone's probably thinking about. And that is, if I can find it, Argent Protector. The algorithm puts Argent Protector and Paladin at 147. That's a really good card.
Yeah.
No one's really arguing with that. If anything, I think people may think it's not as good as a 147, but that's a really good card. And in the same class, it puts a Guardian Augmerchant at a 144, which is basically the same score. So it's better in Paladins because Paladins are normally on the board. Like the algorithm like knows what all the offering rates are and what your cards are and what you do to win and all that stuff, right? So this card is obviously going to be better in Paladin than in other classes. And so in Paladin, a very on the board class, because the best use of this ability, like pinging an opponent, is not really on the same level as giving one of your minions Divine Shield. Like Hand of Protection is 1 mana a card and it's usable. Moonfire is deal 1 damage, 0 mana, and barely usable, right? So you're in different leagues here. So what you really want to do with this card is to hit one of your minions that has initiative, and then like use up the shield on the same turn. Your backup to that is to hit a minion that you play on the same turn, and then like kind of switch one of their health for a Divine Shield. If you think about how health and Divine Shield works, a Raptor is a decent 2-drop at 3/2. A Scarlet Crusader at 3/1 Divine Shield is a decent 3-drop. So you've effectively gained a mana's worth of stuff by doing that exchange of 1 health for a Divine Shield. So that's your backup. And then finally, if like the opportune moment comes up and you need to kill like a 5/1 or something, you can ping your opponent's minion. So really, the vast majority of the time, it's functioning like an Argent Protector, except it's 1 mana less. And it takes away 1 health from your opponent, from the minion that you're trying to buff, and it has 1 less health. So breaking it down, 2 1s are a lot worse than 2 2s. Just like it gets pinged, and we just added an extra ping class, so 2 1s are even worse than 2 2s now than they were before. 2, it does deal 1 extra damage, right? Like I'm not discounting the extra damage; it does deal it. But the most important thing about this extra damage is that you can't do this on a minion that you have that either already has Divine Shield or that has 1 health. And the algorithm knows what your board states are like, and a lot of times you have stuff with 1 health left on the board. And so you can't use this card when you want to.
If not a lot of the times, enough that it matters.
Yeah.
I think too many people are discounting the fact. It's like there's a difference between I am willing to give exchange 1 damage for Divine Shield, and when does that 1 damage matter such that I can't give it Divine Shield or it creates that breakpoint, right? So you saying on average I would make this exchange, this counts the fact in which that 1 damage really does matter. So this sort of thought, like, and I love the fact that you compared it to Argent Protector in Paladin, because I think some people would look at this and say, this is strictly better. Mm-hmm. This is a strictly better.
It is not. Definitely not strictly
Protector.
Better.
It's not. And so,
like, just looking at Argent Protector, you at least lose 2 health for gaining this is 2 health less than Argent Protector is. Just look at it, because it deals 1 damage and it's a 2/1 instead of a 2/2. What do you get when you turn a 1 mana card into a 2 mana card? You usually get 2 stats. So just on that, they're equal.
Yeah.
Like, without thinking about the extra part, which is that sometimes you can't play this card because you don't have another minion that you can play from your hand. Now, usually in the later turns you do, but we're talking like turn 3, for example, when you could play an Argent Protector, or like even turn 4 sometimes. Like, if you're playing Curve, on turn 2, you play a 2-drop. On turn 3, to use this card, you have to play another 2-drop. On turn 4, to use this card, you have to play a 3-drop after you have presumably already played a 3-drop on turn 3. The algorithm knows how many 3-drops you have in your hand. It's not like an unlimited number of 3-drops, and it's not just the chance you have a 3-drop, because you have to have already used up a 3-drop on turn 3 if you had it. You're not gonna not use a 3-drop on turn 3 just to play this card with the 3-drop to get that Divine Shield, you know, and like Hero Power instead or anything. That wouldn't make any sense. So on these on turns 2, 3, and 4, that's a very big vulnerable spot for Guardian Og Merchant compared to Argent Protector. And in the later turns, like the very later turns, we're talking turn 10, 12, or whatever, none of it matters. That 1 mana that you're saving really does not make that big of a deal. And in fact, you'd rather have the card advantage on those turns from the extra 2 stats that Argent Protector gives you than you'd rather have the 1 extra mana of tempo.
Yeah. And also, people are vastly overrating the fact that you can ping an enemy minion. Like
yeah.
I see this in the chat right now, and I see this as well. No. It's Argent Protector plus it can do all of this stuff.
No, you're gonna want to do Argent Protector stuff. You're not gonna want to ping stuff.
So here's the thing: is it gonna save your butt a few times? Yeah, it'll save your butt a few times because you're gonna draft a lot of these, and you'll be like, "Merps, you're crazy. You're wrong. Look how many times I ping with it." But one of the things that the algorithm takes into consideration is, okay, great. How often do you need that 1 damage to ping? Well, if there's like crazy shit happening everywhere in terms of swings, you don't really need 1 damage as much as you think you're going to need 1 damage. And like, are you going to use this instead of your other initiatives that you're going to have by the handful, right? Probably not. Look, we're not discounting the fact that this can ping an enemy minion, and sometimes they have a 7-1, you have no other way, and this comes in clutch and wins you the game. Okay, it'll happen sometimes. But in terms of looking at all the cards that you're going to have, all the swings you're going to have, all the crazy HP and crazy effects that are going on in the game, you pinging with this one isn't going to matter as much as you think it's going to matter. And that's what we want to like put out there as well. I think the human mind, when it evaluates cards like this, they either like, it's really hard for people to properly, this is why we use the algorithm, right? They either go to one extreme and overvalue the flexibility of something, or they significantly undervalue something, and then you just kind of roll with it. But this is one of those cards in which it's just like, it's pretty good. It's not, and that's it. It's sort of like the bottom line. And if you think that this is better than Argent Protector,
like significantly better,
like
we put it 3 points lower. If you're gonna say it's 3 points higher, I'm not gonna argue with you too hard on it. But if you want to say it's 20 points higher, you're just wrong.
That's fine. Yeah. We have it like what right now?
We have it 3 points below Argent Protector. Yeah.
It is the same as Argent Protector. Yeah. It is the same as Argent Protector. But if you're saying it is significantly better, that's not correct.
Yeah.
That's just not correct.
And we know where Argent Protector is. So there's no debate about how good Argent Protector is. At least nobody who thinks Argent Protector is better than a 150. I hear sometimes Argent Protector is not as good as a 150 because it's only a 2-drop and like whatever. But I've never heard of anyone say like, oh, you don't rate it high enough. Okay. Guardian Og Merchant. Let's look at the next Og Merchant. Like, Guardian Og Merchant is the most complicated one, but it's actually, like, not my favorite design. Rocket Og Merchant. I freaking love the design. It is 1 mana, 2/1. Battle Cry, deal 1 damage to a minion and give it a rush. We rated the same for neutral as a Guardian Og Merchant, but as you see in the Paladins, it's dependent on class. So this one basically is a ping, right, which you will use sometimes, but you will be able to give a minion rush. Giving a minion initiative is like so good. Like, I don't know. I don't think people value it as much as giving it Divine Shield because Divine Shield is actual stats. But being able to pick your target, especially in this meta where it's going to be pretty complicated boards because everything's all stally, being able to pick your target will just give whatever minion you give this to like a second life. The 1 damage to it really does hurt it because when you're rushing something, the reason to rush something is to kill something and have your minion live. Otherwise, you're just using it as a removal, and that's pretty crappy. Like, if you have a 5/5 that's rushing and it's just dealing 5 damage, that's a desperate use of Rush. That's not like a normal use of Rush.
When you guys are using it, you'll notice that the 1 damage hurts it like a decent amount. So if you're looking at this and being like, why isn't this a 150? You're just counting that 1 damage a little bit too much.
Yeah,
it really does matter.
If you had 5 health, you were able to take out something that dealt 4 attack or below. Now you're only able to take out something that has 3 attack or below. And there's going to be many cards you want to take out with a 5/5, for example, that has 4 attack rather than 3. But again, you have your choices, right? You can be flexible with it, but that 1 damage does hurt. And otherwise, it's where Guardian Augmerchant is. And if you look at how Blizzard values cards, it kind of works too, right? Because Rocket Boots was draw a card and give Rush to something, and Hand of Protection is give Divine Shield to something for 1 mana less, but you don't draw a card. Actually, no, we literally have a card that's give Divine Shield to someone and draw a card, right? Like that's a card that exists somewhere. I forget which one it is, but that's a card that exists in the game for Paladin. So it's this one has a slight additional advantage in that you can actually play it. It's not even slight. It probably matters like almost 10 points, where you can actually play it on turn 2, 3, or 4 or whatever without having another minion on your side to ping. You can just ping your opponent's minion, even if you don't kill it. Like if your opponent has like a 3/3 and you play this, it trades. It like actually trades with a 3/3. If you were playing the Guardian Augmerchant, you can't even play the Guardian Augmerchant because you'd give it a Divine Shield and that would be terrible. So you just wouldn't even be able to play that card. You'd have to like skip your turn or something. So it does also matter in quite a number of situations in that turns 2, 3, 4 situation.
Yeah.
All right. Finally, the Ethereal Augmerchant, 1 mana, 2/1, battle cry, deal 1 damage to the minion and give it spell damage +3. This one's 126. It's like 7 points below the other ones. And that's because, and this is going to depend on what spell damage does for your class, but giving a minion spell damage means you need another minion. Using that spell damage immediately means that you have to have enough mana for the additional minion, this minion, and your spell. It gets a little iffy. So this one is more like what it would be if you just like dealt damage to a minion. Like if you were just a blow guild sniper for 1 mana instead of 2. And it's a 126, which is pretty good. And that's also why, like I said, like that deal 1 damage thing and being able to actually use it is worth like about 10 points.
Yep. All right. This is a good discussion.
Yeah.
Like these are the cards that I don't mind spending a ton of time talking about because they are extraordinarily meta defining.
Yes. And they're complicated.
And super interesting. Yeah, super duper interesting. They had like the Guardian Augmerchant had an incredibly long Arena HS thread about it, and lots of people made lots of very, very good points. I always like to look at how the community looks at these cards as well. And this is just an interesting card, so I'm glad we talked about it for that period of time.
Yep. Next up is another 132 rated card. This is basically on the same level as Guardian Augmerchant and Rocket Augmerchant, and these cards are all like basically the same level as Scribe. So when we say a card is not good, we don't mean like it's not good. We just mean like it's not Twin Tyrant good. We're all in the premium section here, all right? Like, no one's going to take Eccentric Scribe or History Buff or Candle Taker, which are all neutral cards in this area, and be like, oh, I'm upset that this card's in my deck. You're going to be really happy these cards are in your deck. Just not as happy as if you had a Twin Tyrant. So this one is a Rusted Raider. A terrible card for people with stutters or lisps. It is a 5 mana 1/8 that has both Taunt and Rush, and a battle cry that says gain +4 attack this turn. So you remember the Militia guy that Warriors had that was a 4 mana 2/5 that gained +3 attack on the first turn, and how really good that was? Well, this is like a similar thing, except it is 1 mana more. It loses more attack after the first turn, but it also has 3 more health and a taunt. And I think it comes out at a pretty similar score as that card would. That card's not in the meta, so we can't like look at it. But it's a 5/8 on the turn you play it, right? And then the body it leaves behind is like a smaller taunt that only has 1 damage, but still.
Remember Muck Hunter? That was like a 5
Yeah.
mana 5/8, but it gave your opponent double 2/1s.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure, it kept the attack, but this doesn't give anything to your opponents. Plus, it taunt. So here's the thing about Rusted Raider. This is we're basically entering the Rusted Raider meta, not because of this card specifically, but because get used to cards having taunt, rush, battle cry, some combination of these. That's what we're looking at. Like, okay,
this is
rush?
A common card. Blizzard does not think
exactly.
this is very complicated.
No. Exactly. So cards are going to have multiple effects, and we're going to have lots of taunt. We're going to have lots of rush. Stuff is going to
happen on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have lots of stuff happen. Like, you're going to have stuff that has like, oh, a persistent effect plus a death rattle, like that's just what the meta is. Like, lots of cards that do a lot of immediate things, delayed things, they taunt, really annoying. This is why games are going to go on for freaking forever. But this card, just pure positive. Like, holy cow, this is just really good. Once again, it's only a 132 because other cards are just better. But 132 is still really, really ridiculously good.
Yeah, also, it's also 132 because you can't, like, play it on curve. Like, you can, but you need a target. If you don't have a target, you end up with, like, a 1/8 taunt.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
It does have, like, downsides of
yep.
Like, it's not as flexible as something that's just a 5/8 rush.
Yep.
No, so yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting to play with it. I think it's gonna be everywhere in the meta because it's a common card.
Oh yeah,
it's gonna be obviously good, and it has potentially 8 freaking taunt. Like, this is gonna be one of those cards that's gonna stop aggro. Yeah, right. Like, you can't even remove it in gain tempo because it's already taken out one of your cards. Okay. Rusted Raider, part of the super premium. So these are all cards we rate great, which is 132 plus. Cards we rate good, and we're moving down a step now. This is to 129s.
So not really, like, they're basically the same as all the cards we've been talking
about. Well,
I
mean, really I wouldn't put Burrowing Scorpion, like a 129 at the same level as a 137, for example, right?
Sure, yeah. Frozen Shadow Weaver is a little bit high, but the difference between 129 and 133 is very negligible.
Yeah.
So you can lump these all in same sort of like tier, category, whatever, just because this is on a different column. Doesn't mean anything. Burrowing Scorpion is a 4 mana 5/2 common beast. Battlecry, deal 2 damage. If that kills the target, gain stealth. You guys remember Fireplume Phoenix? That was a 4 mana 3/3. This is a 4 mana 5/2.
This is better.
This is better. This is just better. You gain stealth. Lots of times you are using that 2 damage to finish something off. You want it to be offensively statted. 3/3 was fine. 5/2 is what you really want. It's just a better Fireplume Phoenix. So in other metas, it would be crazy good. In the meta that we're in now, it's just very good. That's it. So it is, along with all the other cards we've been talking about, close to that same tier. So yeah, Burrowing Scorpion is very, very good.
It's also really good for BM because it can go face. It's not limited to the board, and if it kills your opponent, it's gonna stealth.
Yeah. So once again, remember, guys, and I keep on having to say this because I see this comment in chat. It's all relative. If you think this is like, oh, I think this is higher than a 129.
Well, do you think this is higher than a Candle Taker or a Sea Giant? Because those are the cards above and below it.
I think that's a bad example because people will be like, yeah, Candle Taker isn't that good.
What? Really? People don't like Candle Taker?
I think because it's a simple effect. A lot of people are like, oh, yeah.
Okay, fine. History buff. Eccentric Scribe.
Eccentric Scribe, I think, is one that people will. But yeah.
Yeah, like these are the same level of cards, or like similar enough at least. So if you want to know what the downside of it is, why it's not a Twin Tyrant, in case people think it is a Twin Tyrant, I feel like it's clearly not a Twin Tyrant. The downside is that you can't play it on curve, like unless you have a decent target to use it on that does stuff, because otherwise you just have a 5/2. which is like an Ice Rager, and the Ice Rager is 3
Yeah.
mana. And it's the same thing with Fire Plume Phoenix. Like, Fire Plume Phoenix was always a, like, you can play it on curve, like, half the time. So, like, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
It's never that much card advantage. You're in a card advantage meta. Curve is not that important, but you still can't go that far now. This is a huge drop in curve. If you're going to try to use it as a 4-drop. So, and if you're going to try to use it as a utility card later on in the game, it just doesn't quite do as much. So it's in that weird awkward zone where it's like you get a little bit of reach, you get a little bit, you're not like totally screwed on curve, but you're not doing so well half the time, and later on in the game you'd want a card that like does more. So it's still really good, but it's not like amazing except in a very limited like band of circumstances.
So we have it around the same level as Scribe, as Candletaker, as Sea Giant. They are within like literally 1 to 2 points apart. So I see people will be like, no, I think Scribe is a little bit better. I think this is a little bit better. I think that's a little bit better.
That's where that is.
We're within the range, all right? So unless you think it's significantly better, one of these is significantly better, we're within the range of what you guys are sort of discussing as well.
Okay, next up, another fun card, Disguised Wanderer. It's the Diablo 2 card.
Oh, man.
4 mana, 3/3, Death Rattle, summon a 9/1 Inquisitor. So, I mean, 4 mana, 3/3 is not that good, but once you factor in the Death Rattle, it does quite a lot. It has at least 4 health altogether. And its damage ranges from 3 damage to 9 damage. But the 9 damage has to be delayed at least. A lot of things ping these days. Still, it's a crap ton of stats. That's why it's, you know, eccentric Scribe level.
Stats matter. And look, I'm already seeing this, and I can imagine everyone else being like, but there's so much pings. Okay, look, literally, not everyone is going to have a ping available every single time. Okay, I think people just assume that like their opponents always have the answer every single time in every single situation. No. And hey, guess what? Oftentimes that takes a card.
Yep.
Oftentimes that takes a card. And 2 of the classes take a butt ton of face damage if they are tanking this. Actually, no, sorry, 3 classes.
3 of the classes. Only Mage gets away from taking the face damage. And 2 of those classes, your Rogue and your Demon Hunter, are extremely sensitive to face damage. Like, it's very sensitive that they will probably trade a 3/3 into this rather than take the 9 damage to the face.
Yeah. So, look, we kind of faced a similar thing with Cursed Disciple, right?
Yeah.
If you guys remember, Cursed Disciple was 4 mana, 5/1, Death Rattle, summon a 5/1. Okay, we all know Magma Rager is one of the worst cards. It's just like so bad. Now, yeah, sure, you get 2 Magma Ragers, but you pay a little bit more mana. Does that make it suddenly decent? Yeah. It does. It actually makes it a pretty good card. And I think if you played in metas with Cursed Disciple, you'll recognize exactly how annoying it is. Exactly like, you know, the fact that, yeah, you know, if you just get 2 Magma Ragers and, you know, don't exactly double the cost, it's actually pretty decent.
Yep.
This is a kind of a similar thing. And the second body is a lot better. The first body is situationally better, but the second body is a lot better, right?
And I think the most important part about it, as all things with these Death Rattles, where the Death Rattle is like even stronger than the original body, is they want you to leave it on the board. Because you will leave it on the board and go phase, and then they'll buff it, and then they'll do something else with it, and then they'll like copy it, right? There's so many of these effects. There's, you know, literally a card that's coming out in Hunter that's like copies Death Rattles. Like, they will do something to it, or they will have a chance to do something to it that will cause a huge swing and screw you over hard. So does that mean you remove it? No, it does not mean you remove it. You still probably go face when you see this card in, unless you can remove it and you have like a 1/1 or like a ping, you know, one of the like Aug Merchants handy or like whatever that you're gonna play anyway. But it's like just leaving it and waiting for the Death Rattle to trigger and being like, it's not gonna trigger for a few turns. It's like a dormant card. No, it is not like a dormant card. It is very much on the board, and your opponent has a decent chance. Not like a more often than not chance, but like you don't want to have like a 15% chance of getting screwed totally. And you will, because this card's going to be on the board. And that's another reason why it's a swingy, terribly designed card for the arena, like for skill. It's a probably really good, well-designed card for fun.
And on average, it is just going to be very, very good. So look, all of you guys think about those situations that are just like, oh, but like, before you needed 2 pings, now you only need 1 ping, or like this and that. It's like, okay, if you can concoct all these situations, yes, I will admit to you guys that the situation you have created, this card is bad. That's not a discussion. What we are talking about is, on average, is this card really good given all the board states you are going to be presented with and the pressure it puts on your opponent? Undeniably, yes. That's it. That's it. So that's what I kind of don't like about whenever we have these cards and people want to like quote discuss it. They're like, in this situation, it's bad. I'm like,
yeah,
yes.
In that situation where you happen to have 2 pings, it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go with the next one. Simple card, Bone Chewer Brawler. We're at 124 now. 124 is where your like Quicksand Elemental is. It's where your Firehawk is. So still really, really good. This is the meta we're in right now. Remember how great Firehawk was when it first came out? It's now like basically the average card you have in your deck.
Yeah.
It's very sad. So Bone Chewer Brawler is basically that level. It's a 2-mana 2/3 taunt, and on top of that, 2-mana 2/3 taunt itself I figure would be a normal neutral card, but on top of that it has a very relevant ability, which is whenever this minion takes damage, gain +2 attack. So it's got that Amani ability, but gain 2 instead of 3, and you can trigger it multiple times, which probably won't matter unless you buff it or something. So yeah, if you want to compare it to Amani, I don't know exactly where Amani is. Let's see where Amani is. Amani Berserker's a 111, so as expected, this is much better than an Amani Berserker.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
it's got good upside. The taunt matters.
Yep. Same rating is our resident 6-drop. You don't often get a 6-drop, so having a 6-drop is interesting, actually, to put into the meta, especially when Scribe is coming back as well. This one is 6 mana, 5/6, Death Rattle, summon a 3/4 Dragon Rider. It's a butt ton of stats, but the second body is not too relevant by the time it comes out. So it's 124. Just a solid body. Drops are useful even on turn 6.
Yeah, it's very good. So we have this a little bit lower than Scribe, if you guys are curious.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, Scribe is like 7 points higher. That's like meaningful.
Yeah. So basically it's us saying, like the Scribe's initial body is better. Also, here's the thing about Scribe, and part of why people discounted it at first. I think people just assume every buddy in every class has like an arcane explosion always ready. I don't understand what. So here's the thing. I think people
like they think of a situation
systematically assume that 1/1s are worthless. Like you can go into like, I hate this. I go to like all the comment sections and people are just like, no, all it does is spawn 1/1s. I'm like, yeah, 1/1s matter. Like 1/1s are so annoying. Do I prefer 4 1/1s or a 3/4 at that stage of the game? 4 1/1s without a doubt. The 4 1/1s are so freaking annoying, so good. On average, so much more annoying, so much more useful for you than a stupid 3/4.
Okay, for some historical context on why Merps was talking about Scribe being bad, for people in the chat, when we first came out with the rating in Scribe, nobody had freaking talked about it. Like, and we come out with our ratings like last, right? Like we do it right before everything's up because we use the algorithm for this kind of stuff, and it takes a while to get everything up. When we like noted that Scribe was number 1, everyone was like, oh, I mean, I guess it's like a high main, but everyone was pushing all the other cards as potentially things, and we're like, no, at this point Scribe is the best card in the game, except maybe Hogsteed, which is around the same level. And now, because there are so many better large drops, Scribe is not as good as Hogsteed. It's definitely like a step down to Hogsteed. So Hogsteed eventually wins the war as Blizzard added more and more ridiculous like high mana cards like Twin Tyrant. But at the time Scribe came out, which was not that long ago, Scribe came out like less than a year ago.
Well, when we were reviewing, I think it was like actually no,
it was a year ago. It was a year ago when Scribe came out. At that time, that was like one of the most ridiculous large bodies, like better than Worm, which had until that point been the top large body that was like a common neutral.
Yeah.
So that's why we say like, oh, people don't think Scribe is so good. Yes, now everyone knows Scribe is good, but we were like the first ones to like to make the prediction, right, that Scribe was going to be king in that meta, and we were right.
Yeah.
I think if you go back to our predictions, we hit like a ridiculously high accuracy rate on our predictions that don't match other people's predictions, especially for neutral cards, because neutral cards are more systemic, right? Like whereas class cards are more matchup dependent and more.
So
whatever.
Going back to the card that we're talking about, Dragon Ball Sky Stalker. You can say, sure, it's not as good as Scribe is. Like, we've been arguing that. Part of the thing is just like, there's so many good big drops now. It's like, how good is this 6-drop? Well, how necessary is 6 drops, and how sort of covered are they by really good 7 drops and really good 8 drops?
They're very covered by really good 7 and 8 drops right now. So you look at this card and you may think this card is just kind of like a high main. But it's like slightly worse in a couple of ways, right? Like you have more health and attack, and a 3/4 is not as good as 2/2/2s, and they're not beasts, and you're not a hunter. And it just, I mean, but there's no need to talk more about this card. It's a body. Yes. And bodies these days at 6 mana are not worth what they're used to be worth.
That's and for those of you guys wondering, yes, this is better than a Cairn. It's like 10 points better.
Yeah. Well, it front loads the body, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So it's better.
So like this is and like the thing to think about is that Scribe and Hogsteed they came out with Scribe being a little ahead of Hogsteed, like almost 5 points ahead of Hogsteed. And these days, Hogsteed is more than 10 points above Scribe. Scribe didn't get any worse; it just got outclassed. Whereas Hogsteed, in terms of the tempo that it provides on turn 2 and its ability to be a removal, did not get extremely outpaced. Okay. Moving on, we have another interesting card, Overconfident Orc. This is basically the same score as the Bone Chewer and the Dragon Ball Sky Stalker that we were talking about. It is a 3 mana, 1/6 taunt. While at full health, this has +2 attack. So when you put it on the board, it's a 3/6 taunt. That's a Fend Creeper, that's 5 mana. But as soon as it gets hurt, whether you ping it or whether you throw your first minion into it, it only has 1 attack left. So that's still very good. You get a first hit of a 3/6. And it has taunt. It has 6 health of taunt no matter how you play it. But it doesn't quite hit the super premium level because there's so many ways to like screw it over.
Yeah, this is just rank good. I mean, look, if you had a neutral 3 mana 1/6 taunt, that'd be playable, right? That'd be like playable. It wouldn't be great, but it would be playable. This is just really good at stalling the board, giving that neutral taunt that is really annoying. So this is what we talked about when we mentioned that there's going to be a lot of taunts. Games are going to take quite a while because you have stupid stuff like Overconfident Orcs. So this is 123. That's really good. That's really good. It's like same as a Firehawk.
Same as a Bone Wraith.
Yeah,
that 4 mana stall card.
Yep. They do the same thing, right? Yeah. Bone Wraith is so good at stalling, being ridiculously annoying. This isn't as annoying, but it serves the same purpose. It just stalls a ton.
It's like less stally than Bone Wraith, but a bigger kind of like body overall for its mana cost. Okay. After that, we have 122. So again, basically the same score as all of these. A 7 mana taunt to continue this taunt theme. Bone Chewer Vanguard, 7 mana, 4/10 taunt. Whenever this minion takes damage, gain +2 attack. So it has 10 health. It's going to take damage more than once. Probably like more than twice. And it's just going to keep gaining the attack. It's a good. Very good, like you'll notice in our systemic like rankings that these days like just really big like bodies have a lot of competition to it, and then like we always penalize a lot for being high in mana. 7's kind of on that borderline between whether it's like really too high in mana or not. And to get a 122 at a 7 mana cost means it's very good. And it's very well like distributed in its stats, right? Like, you get 10
distribution
health.
Is so good. Like 4 is just enough to like be annoying, but like 10 health, holy, like this is taking 2 hits at least.
Yeah.
Like this is at least taking 2 hits, and then gaining 2 attack. It's like so well distributed. The effect is so helpful for it that, you know, in the meta that we're in, you'd expect kind of like at first glance, you'd almost expect more from a 7 mana card, and you're just like, wow, this is just so annoying and so well statted that it raises the score up, right? The algorithm is just like, yeah, you know, like because of power creep, you might not initially think that this is like so good, but this is like really good, even for a 7 mana card, which, as we know, has quite a lot of competition now.
It is probably the best large card nowadays that's a common neutral that can be assassinated. Or sapped without like
that can be targeted and everything.
Yeah, that can be targeted, that doesn't have a meaningful battle cry, you know, or like rush or whatever. So that's its weakness, but it's about as good. Like, compare this to Bog Creeper, right?
Oh god. Oh, sorry, Bog Creeper. Oh my lord. That
was a meta warping card when it came out. Okay. Rustborn Initiate is next. This is the last card that we're going to talk about in the top 13. It's basically the same level as Vanguard and all those other things we were talking about. With 2 drops, it's similar to like Nephroset Ritualist, Temple Berserker. It's a little better than Temple Berserker. It is a 2 mana 2/2 Death Rattle. Summon a 1/1 Impcaster with spell damage +1. So it's a lot of stats. It's a 2/2 and a 1/1 on the Death Rattle body for 2 mana. So like Harvest Golem for 2 mana, and then there's a little bonus on the imp that has +1 spell damage. It definitely isn't lower. It's just a lot of tempo for a 2-drop. It's not higher because you don't control when that spell damage necessarily comes out. So, and it can like, you can never get the spell damage if your opponent just like clears it on the same turn. So it's a little awkward, right? Like to try to use the spell damage. So the spell damage isn't what you would expect the score to be.
Yep.
Cool. That's it. We've done this long enough. That's your top 13. These are your super meta impactful cards. As you see from our ratings, they are very much in line with the other Year of the Dragon premium cards. They are not even the super premium cards. You don't have your common Twin Tyrants, your even your rare Wrap Golems. You don't have any of that. This is, compared to Year of the Dragon, these neutral cards are relevant but tame. Like, complicated still, swingy still. I think a lot of them are more just like complicated designs or maybe even fun designs, but not good for skill because of the swinginess. But power level wise, they are not out of control. They are not too good. This is not ushering in like even anything on the level of Descent of Dragons, much less continuing to push the envelope. This is a step back for neutral power levels in the arena for this set.
Yep. All right.
Cool. So that's the end of this podcast. Do you have any shout outs to give?
All right. Shout out to everyone watching this, whether live or on the YouTubers. We can't, you know, part of the reason we do this was because we like listening to our own voices, but a lot of it is because people enjoy this content, they use the content. So thank you guys so much for sticking around. I know a lot of you guys are watching this very late as well. So have a Merps heart, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you guys.
See ya.